sharing things about
Whatever. So.
All right, everyone, I think we'll go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is David McDonald. I am the immediate past chair of the Southern region, and I hail from Raleigh, North Carolina. We're a member of the North Carolina Triangle chapter of IABC. I'd like to thank you all for joining us today and for joining us at the conference. I hope you've enjoyed the sessions, and those of you that are joining the dine around this evening, I hope you enjoy that. There were 2 restaurants we have that filled up completely, and those are set to go. The other 4, we had just like 1 or 2 people sign up, so we might have to do a little bit of combining. So if you're on one of those 4 restaurants, if you could see me after the session, and we'll figure that part out. So, but thank you all for coming out this afternoon. It's my pleasure today to introduce our keynote speaker, Elizabeth Edwards. Elizabeth is the founder of Volume PR, Engagement Science Lab, and the Behavioral Communication Movement. A celebrated communication futurist, she has dedicated her award-winning career to accelerating communication results with behavioral and cognitive science. Her work closes the gaps between the study of the mind and the business of engaging it. Please join me in welcoming to the podium Elizabeth Edwards.
Thank you so much. I'm so honored to be here with all of you, and just to echo the sentiment of all of other speakers, it's so good to be back in person. So I have a handout for you. If you haven't seen what's on the screen, if you text the word DECK to 855-958-5532, you can get a nice, shiny electronic copy of today's workbook. But I have 3 copies. Is there anyone who would like them? This isn't a trick. All right. So how about we give one to this table? Maybe you can all share a little bit. And going along, I saw a hand over here. Who else had a hand for me? We only get what we asked for in life, guys.
Can you read that number again?
Yes, it's 855-958-5532. 855-958-5532. Text the word DECK, D-E-C-K, and you'll get a copy of the workbook that accompanies today's presentation. I'm happy to send you a copy of today's presentation too. If you want that, I'll have all my contact info. I've got my cards up here, things like that. If you want to share the deck with anyone back in your teams, and that's the idea. We're taking you through some workshop information today on how can we be effective in engaging in a world that is as noisy as ours has become. So to get us started, I'd like to first look at definitions. My dad was an English teacher. I grew up in the years when you wanted to know how to spell something or how to define something, you had to look it up in the dictionary. So let's spend some time there before we get too far. Now, International Association of Business Communicators, we know what communication means, right? How do we define communication today? It's go back to roots for a moment. We define communication as the exchange of information from a person, a place, a group, a thing, whatnot, right? The exchange of information. What I'm going to talk to you about today, though, I think this definition isn't adequate for our world today, for who we all are and what we actually and really do in professional communication. And I want to challenge us to all start thinking about instead being a behavioral communicator. Because the definition, as I put it, for behavioral communication is the exchange of information with the goal of creating comprehension and understanding. I don't know about many of you, but I would be willing to venture that everyone in this room is exchanging information with the objective of it making some freaking sense. And the person on the other line being more likely to say, yeah, I'm tracking with that, versus what the heck is she talking about? I'm just as lost as I can be. But we don't have any framework for this. How do we define communication or look at some of the models that are out there for us on how communication is structured? Look at this. We have senders, encoders, noise. Anybody feel enlightened? Like you know how to communicate more effectively now? Wait, I got a better one. Maybe you just need more detail. Maybe you just need to know that there's encoding that happens, and then there's a sender and a receiver, and then some decoding and noise everywhere, and then a feedback phase. Anybody super enlightened? I'm not either. And when I was in college, this frustrated me, that this was the extent of the training that we were going to get around certain processes and things in communication. Now let's go back to college for a quick second. What do we learn about how to facilitate understanding and engagement? We have ethos, pathos, logos, very important. But how old is that? I think it's 2,400 years old. Have we learned anything in the last 2,400 years? Yeah, maybe a little, a few things. Okay, so what have we learned? What have we added? We have grammar and syntax. We have AP, Strunk and White, right? We love, okay? But these are mechanics. And I'm going to say something that's maybe controversial, but nobody that I'm looking at in this room is a mechanic, okay? You may do some mechanical work. There might be some mechanical mechanisms to what we do, right? But we are strategists. Communicators are artists. There's so much more to what we do than the nuts and bolts of how we grammatically correctly structure a sentence. And if you want to get really technical about it, these rules actually don't apply very much. Great book out there called Because Internet. And it explains why these rules don't apply since we've democratized writing and everybody posts on social and everybody sends a text. It used to be just us that did the big fancy write it all out, right? So it was supposed to have all these things, but now we see the use of this, because of the way that writing has been democratized, sometimes if we use proper AP and proper grammar and so on and so forth, we create more distance between us and our audience. I can use an example, one of my employees. Grammatically correct to write an email is, hi, comma, Sarah, period, okay? That's my AP way to do it. I had an employee come to me one day and say, am I in trouble? Are you mad at me? What did I do wrong? Your emails are so formal. Like, she wants, hi Sarah, exclamation mark. No commas, no nothing. And the use of two pieces of punctuation around hi and her name was creating distance between us. Do we want that? The whole reason we're communicating in the first place is understanding and engagement and relationship. So what do we do differently? What is called for? I like to sum it up this way. I used to think communication was key until I realized comprehension is. You can communicate all you want, but if you aren't understood, what good did you do? And I'm going to argue to say you didn't do any good. In fact, maybe you caused more problems if we aren't creating understanding. But is it really our fault? Because we are not taught how to communicate to create understanding. We are taught how to broadcast. You saw that definition, right? How to just get it out there, how to exchange, but not necessarily how will we communicate to create understanding, influence decision, and change behavior. Those are the three things we really are doing with communication. And I want to challenge you to think about everything that you have on your communication plate and look at it and really what are you trying to do with those words, and is it not create a state of change? This, I would argue too, is the reason for most of our sources of disconnect. Why we have miscommunications, why we have misunderstanding, or see limited measurable movement from our campaigns and from our work. I really love this organization called AMEC. I'm not sure if you're familiar with them, but they are the International Standards Organization on how you measure the effectiveness of communication. And AMEC has some wonderful resources on their website. If you're not familiar with them, I highly recommend checking them out. They're an international organization, and I cannot pronounce what AMEC actually stands for in its native language, but check out AMEC, A-M-E-C, and what they call the Barcelona Principles. So the Barcelona Principles are the 7 pillars against which we measure if communication has been effective. And here's the thing. When you go into the deeper sets of below these 7 principles, nearly everything centers around measuring what was the perception that was changed, what was the attitude that was changed, and what was the behavior that was changed. But how many of us think about our programs from the strategic moment of start with what perceptions am I influencing, what attitudes and behaviors am I influencing? We don't tend to think of it that way because we're not very empowered in being trained on how to influence those things effectively. Well, until today. So that's what we're going to go through today, and using some science to how to do that. So first of all, who am I? Why am I here? And maybe I kind of address the strangeness in the room. So I just lost 100 pounds in the last 7 months.
Wow.
I work shooting some new video and things here today as well. And why I don't look like my photos anymore, hopefully. But I will be happy to talk to anybody about that later if you want, but I do just want to say a big part of how I did that was by starting to talk to myself the way that I'm going to teach you to talk to others. So why am I the one here talking about this, though? Why did I start doing this? Well, I was very excited and fortunate in college. I got a full scholarship to Pepperdine. And I remember that day so clearly. Do you remember when you declared your major? And I marched in and I was going to major in psychological communication, so determined. And then they told me that that doesn't exist. There is no such thing. And that I could double major, but I had a scholarship for a single major. And I was like determined to get out of there without debt. So that wasn't going to happen. It just really frustrated me that those two things aren't combined. Frustrated me then, it still does today, because they still aren't. And that's why we've created the technology, or the terms, behavioral communication, and that really is the degree program that is needed and what we're going to be giving you a taste of here today. So I left Pepperdine. I went on first to be an internal corporate communication at Boeing. I actually worked down the hall from where they made the space shuttle main engines in their space division in Southern California. Then after that, I went to work for a little PR agency y'all might have heard of called Overly. I think it was number 2 in the world when I was there for a time before I founded Volume, which has now been 20 years since I founded Volume in 2001. And when I founded Volume 20 years ago, what we set out to do was just do our work. We weren't trying to create some system. We just were going to do our work the way I thought it needed to be done, which is informing it with what we call the human sciences, or the science of us. And how do we take what we all know how to do as expert communicators and marry it with what the sciences are telling us your brain likes or doesn't like, or will make your behavior more likely to change, or make it not change. These are the types of things that we studied. You know, in a PR agency, it's real normal when you're managing a PR team is that you have subscriptions to all kinds of magazines, and we have this like Friday reading hour, right? Everybody reads a different pub all week, and we sit together for like an hour on Friday, and everybody on the team shares what they learned and their new thinking and thoughts because of that. Well, we added all these types of publications into that process. The Journal of Consumer Psychology, Psychology and Marketing. I have pictures on my Instagram of me very happily getting my pedicure on Friday night, reading Speaking to the Heart, Social Exclusion and Reliance on Feelings versus Reasons and Persuasion. I love that. I just love that kind of stuff. It's really exciting to me to take these complicated, what in the world are they talking about, and figure out what that means in good old-fashioned English, the language that we can use it. And I can give it to my team to say, hey, write the social post like this instead of like that. And we're going to be able to reach the heart and feelings more than just cognitive reasoning, as an example. So we took all of these things, put them together at Volume for the last 20 years, and they really helped our programs increase in outcomes, so much so that my team said, you know, you need to get out there and start talking to people about this and sharing this and doing trainings on this. And so we began with Volume PR, and now today we also have Engagement Science Lab, which is where we train organizations and communicators and teams on the science of being heard, the science of how to create communication that engages. And I'm giving you a taste of one of our corporate workshops today. We're just gonna go over some foundational things about noise. I'm gonna teach you 3 keys today, and that's what's in your workbook, on how to apply what we call behavioral communication in your work. So where do we apply this? The answer is everywhere. It hits our strategic, high-level thinking. We use this in messaging and positioning to the specific word usage and how we're creating our content, all the way down to marketing, PR, and it makes a huge difference. We have been training companies in every type of category, whether it's Novartis Pharmaceuticals and in science fields themselves, or Transamerica for retirement and financial types of audiences. Really, this doesn't matter. As long as you're speaking to a human, it doesn't matter what industry or space you're in, whether it's tech or health or consumer, as long as your audience has a brain and a heart and a soul, as they all do, this is where it applies. The other thing is that we've started to find, we went in first and we're only training people in communication. But a lot of our clients, our corporate clients, found so much benefit from dialing in their internal and external communication using behavioral comms that we're starting to see comms have more influence in the whole organization. We're rewriting scripts for the sales departments. We're rewriting scripts for call centers in every area. We're creating more executive communication. So I share that I know that sometimes my communication colleagues, we feel that our reach is not as far as it should be. And we have found that by orienting our communication around this framework instead, leadership looks at us differently. Leadership is saying there's some evidence here, there's science, this comm stuff isn't all this fuzzy, it's really making a difference. And what kind of difference do we measure? I just want you to see some of these numbers in green. I'm not talking about something that'll give you a 5% lift. I'm talking about a 400% increase, a 94% increase in sales. These changes make massive measurable differences. So I really want to encourage you to think about the things I'm teaching you today as we're going through them. How can I make a tweak to my communication based on what I'm learning here right away? Because this is very, very actionable information that we're going to give you. So to overarch this one more time, you're learning this for these specific reasons. We're trying to increase connection, comprehension, understanding, motivation, emotion, and memory. How likely is this person to remember what the heck I talked about in a day or in a week? How do we dial that up? What strategies do we have that we know if we attach to our words will make them more memorable? Does anybody feel like you've got a good list right now of how to make your content more memorable? Not a single one of us. How sad is that? That we're in 2021 and we don't know how to do that? But none of us do. None of us were ever taught that, even though it is the absolute core and heart of what we do for a living. So let's change that. Let's start to understand and get specific about what we really do. So to do that, before I get into keys, we're gonna have some science school for just a quick second. And I know from science that I'm about to turn off your brain. So I apologize for what I'm about to do to you, because I know that all these big words, science shows us, it shuts off part of your brain and you stop paying attention. So I'm flagging all over the place right now, because I know that fact is about to happen when you see some of these big terms, and that's what we do. We prepare our audience for the big technical terms that are coming. So there's 4 areas of science that influence what you're learning today. First is behavioral. This is the science of our actions and behaviors. So this is coming from all of the behavioral science or the behavioral economics fields. You may see behavioral economics talked about in press, talked about in a whole bunch of different places. You learn all this, you are learning behavioral economics and how to apply behavioral economics in an actual hands-on way, not just learning theories. The next is what we call cognitive sciences. This is neuroscience or cognitive linguistics. And that's where we look at the science of the mind and its processes. So we've studied a lot what happens when we talk to over here versus talk to over here. How do we create linkages, and how do we get more memory and retention, because we're talking to the different parts of the brain at the same time. Next is social and evolutionary psychology. So the science of our society and relationships. That's sociology and anthropology and ethnography. What do all those fields have to influence communication with? And then evolutionary psychology is where culture comes in. Well, I'm going to give you some examples today of keys that relate very specifically to, it makes so much sense when we think about our culture and how society is advancing. Now here's the terms. Everybody ready for your big, scary definition terms? And then it's going to be all nice and simple from here. What we're teaching in your new language, what you're going to be doing after today is what we call neuropsychological engagement. Neuro, how to engage the neuroconscious, thinking, critical, analyzing mind. Psychological, how to engage the non-conscious, emotional mind, and how to do it at the same time. The technical definition of neuropsychological engagement, what we'll call NPE for short today, is communication that simultaneously engages the conscious and non-conscious mind using science-based techniques that are proven to accelerate agreement and change minds and behavior. And here's the key: by limiting the interference of bias, backfire, decision fatigue, and cognitive overload. Does anybody want to accelerate agreement, change minds and behavior without having all this stuff in your way? Good. All right, well then let's do it. Let's get into how we go about causing this kind of change. Now this talk is titled An Age of Overwhelm, right? Does anybody in this room not feel overwhelmed by communication? Okay, so we are all there, right? But let's take a minute and look at just really what we are dealing with in terms of overwhelm. Did you know it is estimated that we see 7,000 to 50,000 marketing messages a day? And your brain can handle it. It's doing it. It's processing them. I encourage you, if you think this is crazy, to walk through your house and in your bathroom in the mornings. That's the first place you go. I want you to start counting marketing messages. I want you to open your drawer, and I want you to look at that tube of toothpaste and your makeup and your shampoo and your conditioner and everything that's in your bathroom, just in your bathroom. How many marketing messages are coming at you? There versus your kitchen, your laundry room. You haven't even gotten out of the house yet, and you will have thousands of messages talking to you all day, right? We are dealing with people that, even if they're staying at home, are still experiencing a great amount of communication fatigue. We're getting too many messages a day is one of the main points there. The next is we have to make too many decisions. Does anybody feel what we call decision fatigue? Yeah. Do you know how many decisions you actually make in a day? Venture to guess. What would you guess? Guess a crazy high amount. It won't be high enough. We make 35,000 decisions a day. That is one every 2 seconds. Now, anybody feel like that's a little exaggerated? It's not, because the thing is that your subconscious, your non-conscious mind was designed to do this. But if your non-conscious mind is the one in the driver's seat helping you make 35,000 decisions a day, how do we talk to it? And then let's layer on top of that too, that we're having 70,000 thoughts per day. So we have 50,000 marketing messages, 35,000 decisions, and 70,000 thoughts. No wonder we're tired, okay? We have earned some rest and some quiet, but it's our job to be heard through all of this. So what the heck are we supposed to do to make a meaningful connection in all of this? What's happening in our audience is a problem with what we call cognitive load or cognitive overload. Cognitive load theory, and this will be in your workbook with some more detail. Cognitive load theory says that when information comes to us and it hits our brain, there's 3 categories that decide how hard that information is going to be for us to be able to make new sense of it. So these are your 3 checkpoints when you're looking at, all right, we have new information for the organization. Well, first of all, what's its intrinsic load? How complicated is it? Is it just complicated new information, or is it easy new information? If it's easy new information, great. If it's a new intranet, that might be a little more complex, right? How complex is the information, and how much of a load does it bear on my audience from that intrinsic perspective? Second is the germane load. How much do they have to do linking? How much is their brain having to connect this idea with this idea over here to form a new thought? Because that's a different kind of mental process and creates a different level of load. And then third is what we call extraneous load. That's unnecessary or distracting kind of information. It might be stories or many different ways around it. So what you find is if you're like, wow, this thing we're dealing with here has really heavy intrinsic load and really heavy germane load, then cut out everything extraneous. There really isn't a place for, and then there's this too, and then there's this too, right? If they're already in a state of load. But based on all this, what's important for you to have as a definition is what we call cognitive overload. And science is measuring that when our working memory receives more information than we can comfortably handle, it enters a state of what they call cognitive overload. And what's important for you to see here is that it leads to frustration and compromised decision-making. That means I'm so overwhelmed with this information, I can't even make the right decision anymore. I'm not gonna make a rational, logical decision as I may have previously because I'm so darn overwhelmed and exhausted. There's a lot of studies that your ability or how people complied with social distancing recommendations early on in the pandemic had a direct correlation to how much their working memory could handle at once. Think about it like a juggler, right? You throw too many balls at someone, they're gonna lose it. And some people can handle more balls than others, right? The less we could handle, the more we shorted out and just said, I'm not taking any of this information anymore, I'm not making any decisions, my decisions are gonna be compromised from here on out. If you're interested in this topic from the perspective of the pandemic, on Medium, I have an article called Designed to Divide, Why Messaging Unintentionally Created the Mask Debate. It's a nice long read, 14 minutes, but if you want to check it out, it breaks down from our perspective what happened in March that guaranteed we were going to have a massive debate. Doesn't matter, but there were certain things that happened in the mitigation of communication based on the fact that we are in cognitive overload and crisis and decision fatigue that guaranteed this would be our norm. So I highly recommend checking that out if you're interested in that. Now, I've talked about conscious and non-conscious. Let me orient us here for a minute, because what you're going to start doing differently is ensuring that you are speaking to both the conscious and the non-conscious mind at the same time. And why this matters so much is that science is showing that we make as much as 95% of our decisions in our non-conscious. Some say 99% of our decisions. So if those 35,000 decisions are getting made almost exclusively in the non-conscious mind, but yet in communication, we never talk to the non-conscious mind, we're designed to fail from the beginning. We're designed to struggle. We're designed to have limited influence if we only speak to 1 to 5% of our audience. And I want you to think about that now too. Your audience, it isn't just the people in your company or certain demographics or psychographics. Your audience is the mind, the conscious and the non-conscious. And talking to only 1 to 5% of your audience is not an effective strategy. You will only get results of 1 to 5% kind of numbers, right? That's why we showed you the types of measures that we measure, the improvements we're measuring are 400% big things, because that's what happens when you really intentionally start talking to the non-conscious mind. Now, how do I know what I'm about to teach you works and that how we talk to the non-conscious mind? Well, there's a new field of research out there called non-conscious market research. Has anyone done any non-conscious research in your companies? So many interesting ways that we can start incorporating non-conscious research. Oh, I could do a talk on this for 3 hours alone of the different ways to see how we're using this. But it's ways that we're starting to survey without just saying, hey, conscious mind, what do you think about X, Y, and Z? Because you're going to get the wrong answers a lot of the time. In focus groups, we edit ourselves because of peer pressure, so many things, but there's ways that we can add non-conscious elements into those efforts to get us really clearly seeing what the non-conscious mind is talking about. The next I talked about that is in our kind of a form of interference is cognitive bias. Now this image here, and there's a link on the bottom, again, if you grab my card afterwards, I'm happy to email you a copy of the presentation. This is a Wikimedia file so that you can interact with it. But it's called the Cognitive Bias Codex. It's a map that was created in 2016 of our communication coping mechanisms. What's happening in our non-conscious mind that science has mapped that we are using to help filter understanding and create meaning. So look at it. This is just the top right-hand corner. These are just all of the things that we are doing because we receive too much information in our world. So every element of this diagram has different elements, but this is where you see these are all of the effects that happen when we notice that something has changed and how our brain flags and pays attention to moments of change, as opposed to how we are drawn to details that confirm our own existing beliefs. That's a confirmation bias. We've heard a lot of the negative and the problems that confirmation bias creates with racial inequality and ageism and sexism and things like that. But what are all of these other biases teaching us? A lot of them teach us things about ourselves that really help us as communication professionals to understand and to integrate into the work we do. Survivorship bias is one that we all have. Okay? So survivorship bias says that we have a tendency to learn from the people who won as opposed to the people who didn't. Because the ones who won, or the people who survived, are the ones who came back and told their stories. Like, what's that stat? I can't remember it off the top of my head, about how many business books are written every year versus how many are published. But we have the tendency to think, oh, it's easy to write a book, because look, I see all the ones that are written. I didn't see the 5 million people that wrote a book and are in their basement crying because no one ever bought it, right? We don't see that. So we learn from the winners, and we tend to think that success is easier and we can obtain that no problem. Now, we work with life insurance companies. Survivorship bias plays a huge part in how we talk to people and how we create strategies, knowing that there is a likelihood in their brain that they're thinking, I don't need life insurance, I'm gonna be fine. So how do we approach comms differently because of some of these biases? And I wanna say to you too, there are biases that create challenges in our world, like confirmation bias we talked about. But to say I need to stop all bias, we need bias training in our organizations that is only how to get rid of evil bias. I don't think that your brains are inherently evil. I completely disregard that thinking. I think that there are some biases certainly that we need to train around for things related to everything I talked about. But the rest of these biases, this is how your brain was designed for you to survive. And I'm sorry, your brain surviving and getting you here today is a good thing. Instead, what we have as an opportunity to do is to learn from these biases and say, how do I create meaning with someone because of it? How do I engage them differently because I know of this bias? Rather than just saying to them, because you have a bias that things that are funny are more memorable, how dare you? How dare you think things that are funny are more memorable? No, of course we wouldn't say that. We're going to learn how to make things funny in the right way so as to deepen memory when we're talking about something that has a significant cognitive load. Right? So let's get into, wow, that just, look, it did like 3 all at once. I once gave a talk where this clicker wouldn't work, and there was a guy named Alan, like behind a curtain, and I had to yell to Alan to advance every one of my slides. So, I got like 80. So this doesn't stress me at all. We'll be fine. All right, here we go. So let's get into the NPE keys of how we create meaning, and we're going to go through 3 of these with you here today, okay? So the first is what we call nudge and choice architecture. Now I want you all to put a new title on your cards. Anybody been calling themselves a choice architect? Well, guess what? You are, and you have been architecting choice every day that you have been a communicator. And now we're going to give you this title officially and understand what it means to think about the choices I'm putting together and how I'm architecting them. So this comes first from some work done in a book called Nudge. There's a new version out since this photo. But what Nudge is thinking about how do we communicate to people, engage people, so that we can alter their behavior in a predictable way without giving them a financial incentive. Now, most of us in comms, my PR agency and things, we're not couponing things, we're not giving discounts. So this is what we already were doing. And most of us in professional communication, it's what we have to do. How do I get people to consider something without giving a coupon to go with it? So let's look at some examples of nudge. Well, first, choice architecture. Definition here, this is how we design choices in different ways to impact decision making. Think about forms, think about questions, think about the step-by-step process that the website takes us through. Think about the way a brochure lays out information. All of these things are giving that mind a choice. Do I read this first or that first? Do I answer the question this way or that way? So let's look at some examples. Here's some examples of nudge in design, okay? So this first here, stairs, right? So instead of, do we make a sign that says stand on the right, walk on the left? Or do we put little stickers like this? Or if we're trying to encourage, don't use so much toilet paper. Can you guys see better if I'm up here? What's this one in the middle, right? It just creates the slightest little level of friction when you pull that is nudging you to not pull so much, okay? Or over here, this is a recycling bin with a fun maze leading up to it, right? My kids, I have 2 little boys, they're 9 and 6. This would get them walking the maze to throw away the trash all day long, right? It's something fun. Ways that we see nudge in design. And as I'm showing you these examples, I want you to think about, in your organization, what are you communicating with words that maybe you should not be using words for? Maybe words aren't serving you. Maybe we actually need to just use colors or stickers or other ways to nudge the desired behavior. So in a grocery store, there's a study done in a grocery store. The produce department is in the far back. How do we get more people to come to the produce department? Well, yeah, we could put up like, tomatoes are on sale, apples back here, right? But that's all discounting. So what do we do that doesn't do that? Well, they put down green stickers, green arrows, nothing else, just a green arrow, and measured that now, what was it? 9 out of 10 people who came to the store are now going back to the produce department. No words, just green arrows. Now, how many times have you been in a talk where there's been a giant urinal on the wall? Okay. This is one of the most famous nudges of all time, so I have to teach you guys this one, of course. There was a problem in an Amsterdam airport or a train station with, it was messy in the men's room, let's just say politely, right? It's messy, so they wanted to test, can we nudge people to be cleaner? How do you get boys to be cleaner in a bathroom? My God, please tell me, mine are 9 and 6, and yeah. Well, what they did was they put a hyper-realistic sticker of a fly in the urinal. Can you guys see that?
Oh my gosh.
What do you think it did to the poor person who had to measure this? I apologize for that person. But they measured an 80% decrease in spillage. 80% with a sticker of a fly. Do you care if you can measure an 80% change in behavior if a sticker did it versus words? No, right? A sticker is communication. A picture is communication, right? I think I'm among good company. We all agree. We don't care if it's a sticker. We don't care if it's a color or if it is a novel. We just want to affect positive change and understanding in our audiences. How about this? Nudge in public health. Blood donors in Sweden get a text message whenever their blood saves someone's life. Gives me chills. Would you donate blood more? Yes. Can you imagine what it would be like if you're sitting here at this table and she picks up her phone and looks at you and says, my blood just saved someone's life? What effect will that have? You have permission, I'm officially giving it to you right now, to suggest these types of changes in your organization. To be the champions that think, how do I nudge behavior? The answer may not be what communication do I create, maybe what campaign do I create differently, or how do I tell my organization we should be thinking about this problem and the solution in a whole different way, because you're thinking about yourself as an artist in nudge and in architecting choice. Does anybody live here locally, if you get Excel bills in the mail, they look somewhat similar to this, right? Where instead of save energy, rebate this, or coupon this, or whatnot, they compare you to your neighbors and show you how efficient you're being, smiley faces, all these types of things. The important thing to know is that this measures 8x greater return than things like rebates. 8 times greater return, because we're using contrast, and we're using some of the tools and techniques we're going to teach today. How about H&R Block? If they did a program where they autofill FAFSA forms with available H&R Block info, right? It's not necessarily that much that it's saving them, but making just a little bit easier of a step. Do you see these numbers? You were a full 8.1 percentage points more likely to attend college the following year if there was an integration with H&R Block to autofill some of those details. Why? How is that happening? Because we're overloaded. We're tired. That cognitive overload and overwhelm. You fill out a few more forms, a few more details for me, make it a little bit easier. I'll commit and I'll go to the end. And not only that, but I'm more likely to go to college because of it. We have such power and responsibility as communicators. There's a beach in Australia where they had an issue with pollution. So what do? It's our job to make a sign about pollution. How are we going to stop this pollution problem? So is it clean up after yourself, you filthy animal? Is it, here's where the trash can is, since you clearly can't see it? You know, what are we supposed to do? Well, Instead, they went to how do we make it fun? How do we make this an activity for people? And they created this wire mesh art installation. His name is Gobi, and he has a sign on the front that says something to the effect of, "Hi, my name is Gobi the fish. I'm hungry. I eat plastic. Please feed me." He's covered in wire mesh so that people come to the beach now, and when they're out and they see trash, they're not picking up trash to put it in the garbage to help their fellow beachgoer. They're feeding Gobi. They have to empty Gobi twice as much as they ever thought they would have to, because now people will, let's go for a walk tonight. Well, let's go to the beach and feed Gobi, right? How do you create some activity there? Or how about this? Did that not talk to your non-conscious mind before it talked to your conscious mind? Just like that. Right, and you make me laugh. Like, I love when I saw one of these in the wild, in real life. I think it was at a Target. And it just made me smile and laugh because that's that non-conscious banana peel slippy thing. I'm looking out for you, friend, as opposed to don't come over here, don't walk here. Our speaker before mentioned too how much newer, younger generations especially stop telling us what to do all the time, right? We don't like to be told what to do. This is a friendly suggestion. I love this choice architecture example because it comes back to words, which is what we all are the artists of most of all. So it's a hospital, and their goal is that they want to decrease the amount of unhealthy foods and beverages that people are eating and drinking in the cafeteria, right? So it's a hospital. We want healthy people in the hospital, right? So what do? As you're walking through a cafeteria line, what are our word choices? We could put up nutritional information, ingredient information. Well, what they tested, because of nudge and choice architecture, is what if we just put dots? Red, yellow, green. We know traffic color signals are universal, right? We know red's bad, green's good. You guys can see the statistics. They decreased red beverage consumption by almost 40% in 2 years. Okay, so did everybody just not get that full sugar soda wasn't good for them before? Of course, their cognitive brain understood it before and it understood it after. What was different? Their non-conscious brain was seeing a red stop sign over and over and over, and red means stop. Red means no. Red means do not proceed. We need to talk to our friends at Wells Fargo and tell them they need to change their website. They have just changed the website so that it takes over your entire browser and makes everything red. I feel like I'm in crisis mode when I go to their page, right? Red is no in our non-conscious in many ways. There's a lot of times it conveys bold and strength and good, but here's a great example of showing you people didn't all of a sudden, oh, I just didn't get that was bad for me. Thanks for letting me know. No, they knew it all along. We just changed how we talk to them about it. So here's your 3 takeaways on nudge and choice architecture, the way you start to put this to work in your company. Mapping out what perceptions, attitudes, and behaviors are being affected by the work that I'm trying to do here today. What choices do I want my audience to consider? And what friction exists between the current state that they're in and the goal state of where I'm trying to get them? This is in the workbook, by the way, so when you download the workbook, these are great exercises to do with your team. Okay? All right, so the next key we're going to teach you, I have 2 more, is what is called social proof. Anyone heard of social proof? This is one that a lot of us have heard of, but we bring it up because so many people are doing it wrong. They're doing it in the negative so as to cause the exact opposite of what we're trying to have happen. These things are very effective. You use them backwards, it's not going to be a pretty outcome. Transamerica had this issue. They came to us and hired us to audit their communication, which is a very common way that we get started with a company. Let's just come in and audit what might be broken, where you're having a problem and you want us to look at something. So they had a particular 401k product. This is, imagine you're like it's your first job at, let's say, Subway, or something like that, and you're getting the paperwork of your 401k, okay? So that's who the product was targeted for. And it's hero messaging. They had hired this very celebrated firm out of New York that knows everything about the consumer and how you message, and this firm remessaged the whole product line around this anchor social proof. 84% of Americans are not saving enough for retirement. And they hired us because when they launched this fabulous enhanced new messaging, sales started to rescind even more. They were at X and they started to back up all the way to B. It was a horrible regression and people not wanting the message. So what do you do though when you see that kind of response? Well, we audited to see what's happening, and I'll show you what's wrong with this. According to social proof, right, we need to sync with the bias of we look to the outside world to show us how we should behave. So I look to media coverage or reviews or testimonials or all these different types of things to tell me how I should behave. Remember I mentioned evolutionary psychology a moment ago? So how many years ago was it that we were all doing this here in Denver? Not really that long ago, as far as our brain is considered. It wasn't very long ago that we survived by community. If I didn't get along with you, you didn't get along with me, my family and I were not gonna make it. We couldn't just like stake out over here, build a little homestead and call it good, right? Where are we gonna get our water and our food and all the things we need to coordinate with one another? And because survival by community is so entrenched in us, evolutionarily, we really, this is the whole core of social proof, is that we're looking to our community to tell us, what do I do in order to be surviving, in order to be okay and to be good here? So if I go against society, it will be only negative for me. There was a study done at a hotel where they wanted to test if we socialize, put a social proof spin on a message, are people more likely to resonate with it well? So we've all stayed in hotels where they have the, please hang up your towel to save the planet, save water, save the environment, right? That's a good noble cause, isn't it? The planet, it's where we live, we all care about it. But when you personalized it and it was no longer about the planet, not about some lofty goal, we're talking to you. We're saying all the other guests in this hotel have been recycling their towels. Will you recycle your towel too, please? All right, yeah, 26% of people said, yeah, I will. I'll be more likely to do that. But then, this was a study, not a real hotel doing this as their tactic, because they're just there to provide value, right? And be comfortable. They don't really, aren't trying to put the skins on how much we're really recycling the towels. When they did so in the study, and they said, all right, all guests of room 201 have been recycling their towels. Will you please do so too? A full third increase in change in behavior. Want to help keep the streak going. This is what everybody else doing here has been. I'm in here, I will do this now. There's this connection that I have with my community. So where's your connection with community? We know social posts, awards, these are all examples of typical things that we see with social proof. But let's look at it as I was talking about in that negative framework. At the Arizona Petrified Forest, has anybody been there? I hear they're not making much more petrified wood anytime soon, right? So they don't want it to be stolen. So there's a sign that they had, not stealing and whatnot, and it wasn't working too well, so they were doing a study where they put up a sign that instead of saying, please don't steal from the park, they said, many past visitors have removed petrified wood from the park, stealing your heritage one small piece at a time. Jerks, how dare they? Now, what do you think happened to theft when they tested this message? It tripled. Tripled. Everybody is saying, well, if they're all taking it, I might as well too. I want my grandkids to get to see some of this stuff. I'll just keep it in my library back home. Why not?
Better get in line before it's done.
Exactly. Let me get in line before it's all gone. That's exactly the thing. So, the key headline is never frame a social proof in the negative unless you are trying to tell people what not to do. Transamerica was telling people, don't buy this retirement product. Nobody does. Nobody is saving for retirement. 84% of Americans have decided it's not a smart thing to do. That's not what we're going for. Right? So instead, saving for retirement, it's easy, it's smart. We're going to focus on the positives. Who is doing it? What are testimonials from those who are doing it and started young? Who are the celebrities that they idolize that started young and are here to tell you to start young? This is the way we need to think about things. So your 3 workbook questions. It's all right. Your 3 workbook questions when it comes to social proof. I want you to think about what beliefs and behaviors need to be emphasized for my audience to be participating in. What do I want them to be doing or thinking? What societal agreements already exist around these beliefs and behaviors? There may be things that are already in place that we've all decided as a society or how we believe and think about something. Are there things that I should be tapping into, or that, even worse, maybe my communication is offending? And let's make sure that that's not happening. And then who, what, where does my audience respect on this topic? And how do I get those respected voices present from day one or higher up in my engagement? All right, we have time for one more? Got space in your mind for one more here? I'm gonna teach you one of the most, I always feel like saying this, one of the most important, my most favorite. I love them all, but this one is really key, and I include this in almost everything I do as a verbal communicator, the way that I talk to my children. This has been very key in my weight loss journey and how I talk to myself and my non-conscious mind about what we're doing, and it is called contrast effect. The best way I can show you contrast effect is this beautiful work that Whole Foods did when they wanted to enter the conversation around honeybees and the plight of the honeybees. Now they could put out a press release about the plight of honeybees just like everybody else did, or create some fun campaign. Cheerios did some really cool stuff with their bee. You know, there was all kinds of things happening. But what Whole Foods did there really arrested the conversation in a significant way is they put out a press release contrasting your produce choice with bees versus your produce choice without bees. Right? Now, I'm going to tell you, I bet what you're looking at is different than what you're looking at and different than what you're looking at. We all see something there that is personal to us and is contrasting for us. Like for me, it's where'd my Honeycrisp apple goes? Where did they go? I cannot live without those things. Like, do not take that away from me. We don't like choices being taken away. If we contrast things, especially to show a removal of choice, a removal of options, gets us even more worked up on solving that problem. Whole Foods did a spectacular job in this example of contrast. Here's one, just contrasting paper usage in a visual form from Saatchi & Saatchi. Or maybe this, Pepsi, they put out this contrast ad. We wish you a scary Halloween, because wouldn't it be scary if you're going for a Pepsi, but it comes as a Coke accidentally? But then Coke came out and says, everybody wants to be heroes. Play with your competitors. They might come back at you. But some others in how we use contrast. This is talking about awareness and compassion. They put them on bottles. And they put them, this is the Red Cross, putting them in an unexpected, my brain is not expecting to see on these things a just definition of what it means to be compassionate or to be aware. I pay attention at a different level. My non-conscious mind snaps into focus a little bit more, is more likely to remember these things too. Do any of you think that you will forget that blood donors in Sweden get a text message when their blood saves a life? I don't either. This is from Greenpeace. Really interesting in that what they're wanting to communicate to people is, hey, when you're consuming GMO foods, you may be consuming pieces of insects. And if you're vegan, you might not want to be consuming pieces of insects. And so how do they show that is that they contrast your expectation is it's an insect, but that's actually a green onion, you know, in that shape. Or a carrot in the shape of that scorpion, right? Are you gonna forget this? Your non-conscious mind and your conscious mind are processing it together to create meaning. Here's another example from Red Wing Shoes using contrast. And really, really good copy. Really just tight, clear copy. It's a small world. Do big things. Make history. Right? We're going to contrast way back in the day the importance of our boots versus where we are now. Or how about this one? And to think, some men spend their days building relationships. Make history, right? How powerful is this in contrasting and how much it says? It says so much more than any of our ads ever could, any of our communications. So how do we align with contrast effect? Takeaways, think about with and without, before and after, now, later, you, others. There's so many ways. I want to challenge you, use it in your verbal all the time. Every chance you get, contrast things. Well, it could be this or this. We could approach this in different ways. Just try it at home. Try it with your friends. See what it does and how it influences. Do you get more of these types of looks? Or are you getting more of like, oh yeah, I'm with you. I'm tracking there. So now how we use it specifically though, to map what positive attributes of my topic can be further enhanced by contrast. And so I want you to think about, dial in on what are the positives in my topic, what opposing states exist around my topic, and what pain may exist or occur in contrast to the gain that my message offers. There's so much I could teach you on behavioral communication, guys. I could be up here for 4 days. I want to keep going, but let me tell you, pain and gain, write that one down as a side note. We orient, this is prospect theory and so many other things, but the thing is we think about and look at things of, I have this pain and I want to gain to help me balance that and solve that. So when you're contrasting, specifically go to the root of the pain that the audience is feeling and how to contrast it with the gain that your communication proposes and brings. So in summary, what are we going to do different in this age of overwhelm to be more effective and understood? First, we're going to engage the conscious and the non-conscious mind at the same time. Because, hey, in case it's not clear, I'm going to newsflash this. You already are. You're just not necessarily doing it cognitively or consciously of what the non-conscious likes and doesn't like. It's being activated and participating in that decision-making process, whether you know it or not. Whether you bring it to the party in an effective way, or whether it's just along for the ride and you're really only concerning yourself with what the cognitive, critical thinking mind thinks, which is a mistake. Number two, we're going to appeal to the non-conscious decision and understanding with these new keys that we understand or what make it pay attention and come to the party more. Then we're going to ethically nudge and architect choice with awareness, syncing social proof with positive desired change, contrasting pain and gain. Those are the 5 things that we are going to do for our audience. I'll leave this here for those who are taking photos. The 5 things that are different in the ways that we accelerate engagement, accelerate understanding, get people to know what the heck we are talking about. I want you to see number 3, ethically nudge and architect choice with awareness. September was PR Ethics Month, and I wrote an article for Strategies Magazine, Strategic Magazine, on creating confusion or comprehension, the ethical imperative for behavioral communication. This link, you can find it online in the September 21 issue if you are interested in exploring this more, but I explain, it actually starts with the concept of if we ever get to be at a conference again together. So I kind of love that we're at a conference again together, but I explain here, if we're at a conference and I bump into you and knock you to the floor, what ethically am I supposed to do? Point at you and laugh? Just walk by and say, I didn't mean to, so it doesn't matter, she's on the floor. It wasn't my intention. No, I'm supposed to help you up. But what do we do when our communication knocks you to the floor and you're not understanding? Right now, what most of us do is just keep walking because we don't know what else to do. And so we talk about here, encourage reading this, and really kind of reframing our thinking is, do we not have an ethical imperative to pick people up and stop knocking them to the floor now that we know that it's actually their non-conscious that is driving? And I think that we do. So, my friends, that is everything I have for you this afternoon. Thank you. I don't know if we have any time for Q&A, but I will be here for a little while if you have any questions. I'm happy to answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Okay, let's hear another round of applause if you think you're listening. As she said, it's so nice to be doing this again. A couple of quick notes. For those of you doing the dine around tonight, for those that are doing Il Posto and the La Loma Mexican restaurant, those are full, and meet down in the lobby at 6:45, and your groups will go from there. If you signed up for one of the others, please meet out by the sign-up sheets, and we'll try to figure out if we can combine them into one other restaurant, because we had just 1 or 2 for those restaurants, so we'll figure that out. Tomorrow morning, the full breakfast starts at 7:45, and our keynote speaker will begin at 8 a.m. So whatever you do tonight, please be safe, have fun. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow morning to wrap up this great conference. Thanks, everyone.